I'm going to show you how to replace the rear leaf springs on a 2008 Nissan Frontier. If you find this content helpful, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So here we have the truck parked on a level surface. We get under the truck, we can see the broken leaf in the middle of this spring pack. We're going to swap both of them, both sides. First thing we do is just loosen the lug nuts. With the vehicle jacked up, tire under, you can see that broken leaf spring again. And we're going to start to take it out. So the first thing we do is remove these ABS wires. There's about 4 places where they secure down just to give us some more room because we're going to be dropping the axle. We want to loosen these along with that brake line pin, which I'll show you in a second. But just make sure those are all free. This is the brake line pin I was talking about. Just lubed it up so it's pretty seized up. Just hit it with a screwdriver and a hammer to pop this little clip out. There's the clip. Hang on to that. And with that, the brake line comes free. So then that gives us enough room. When you're on the other side, you got to remove these 2 brackets that hold the e-brake line on also, just a reminder. And this, you just undo it. I think they were 14 millimeters. I can't quite remember. And you undo those 2. This again is on the other side. So just make sure to undo these brackets before lowering the axle too much. Make sure you have your wheels blocked and that your vehicle is supported with jack stands. I got 2, one under the hitch and the frame, and you're gonna be jacking the axle up from the pumpkin and the actual axle. And I'm going to use penetrating oil on all the bolts we're going to be undoing. So the first thing we loosen is the lower shock bolt, and I think it's a 19 millimeter, and you can see I got another wrench braced up against the axle, and it gives me the leverage to then loosen this bolt up because it was pretty seized up. Once that's off, don't hammer the bolt out. Lift the vehicle just a little bit to relieve the tension, and the bolt slides right out. Put it back in the bracket to make sure it stays safe. Now we can loosen the front leaf spring bolt. And you can see I got this breaker bar actually braced against the leaf spring. And this is the other side with the gas tank in the way. You just need a wrench to get in there. And it was a little bit more difficult, but still very much possible. Now you just use the leaf spring for the one wrench for leverage and slowly undo it. These are pretty tight. And again, save all the hardware. Hang on to these. And don't hammer the bolts out yet. It's damn near impossible. And don't pry it out. You'll end up causing damage to the bolt. What you want to do is then go to the rear. Same thing. I believe these are 19. They might be 19, 21, or 22 millimeters. I can't remember at the moment. And you can kind of get the bolt out, but then you need to lift and the axle needs to be in the right spot to relieve the tension, and the bolt slips right out. So you see I raised it up a little bit, and with a little bit of persuasion, I could get this bolt out. So take that front one out first, and then you can play with the rear one, raising it and lowering it until you find that perfect point where it comes out. So put the jack stand under the axle just to be safe. And then we undo these lower U-bolt nuts. There's 4 of them. Just get those off, and then you can hammer it off with a pry bar and a hammer. Get it off. There's a little bit of tension on the U-bolts. That's why it's hard to get off. Lower the axle down onto the jack stand. Remove that bump stop, and you'll find that unless you lowered it enough, you can't get it out. So make sure to lower the vehicle to the proper amount, and then the leaf spring now comes right out because it's not secured at all. Fortunately, the new bushing kit did not come with this sleeve, and I have to remove the old bushing and get this old sleeve out, but it's so corroded and caked in there that I have to just slowly destroy it, use a screwdriver, peel it off, and pull it out. This took quite a while. Finally got all that bushing out. This is what it looks like with the bushing removed. So the whole point of it was to get to this sleeve right here, which is so dirty, I had to take a wire wheel to it and clean it off. The new leaf spring has one of the bushings built into it, pushed into it, but the other one is just a traditional kind of, you slip it in like this, and then the sleeve goes in the middle, and then the bolt through that. So with that done, which took a while, we can now put the leaf spring back on. We can mount the U-bolts and the bump stop. Just make sure that's on there nice and good. You can put that lower bracket on, which is a little difficult. You got to pinch those U-bolts a little bit, but you can get one side on, a couple of the nuts, and then you can get the other side on with a little bit of squeezing of that U-bolt. Now tighten them down, but don't torque them down. Just get them a little tight, because we still got to wiggle it around to fit it in these brackets for these bushings. So like I was saying earlier, the front bushings are pressed in and these rear ones aren't. So you can kind of move them and wiggle them and squeeze them. And you just need to jack the vehicle up and make sure they go in there nice and you're not tearing them. And then you can slip the bolt in, the washer, and the nut. Now these are not the stock shackles, so they are greasable bolts. Just make sure those are nice and tight. Then we can get the front one in, and we'll go back down and torque all these things in a moment. But you need to jack the vehicle up so there's tension on this spring. Then you need a nice long pry bar on top of it. You can then push it down and it lines up perfect. But you need to put some tension from the jack in order to stretch out that leaf spring to reach there if you can't move that rear shackle forward enough to make it line up. Now these front leaf spring bolts we're supposed to replace, but instead we're just going to torque them down to 84 foot-pounds, which is what they call for, but a little bit further we're going to go to 90. And again, this is the other side, which you'll have to do the same thing on. And the rear shackle bolts, they do not need to be replaced, but they call for 77 foot-pounds. These U-bolt nuts should also be replaced. They are called at 53 pounds. So any bolt that's replaced, we're going to tighten it about 5 foot-pounds more. Now this lower bolt to this shock is 149 foot-pounds of torque. So that's nice and tight. Again, you're going to want to over tighten these bolts just a little bit if it says replace, if you can't get the replacement nut, but we're gonna use the old ones. Now we need to put that ABS wire back on. The brake fluid line pin clip needs to be reattached like this. One thing I had to be careful of was my aftermarket breather hose for my axle. I kind of stretched this out pretty far, but it didn't come off, luckily. Fortunately, I lowered it enough where it didn't really matter. Just want to mention that. Also, redo the 2 brackets for the parking brake line. Just make sure those are nice and secure. Again, it's on the driver's side of the vehicle and on top of the pumpkin. So, with those all torqued down and tightened, we can now lower the axle to its kind of normal position. And like I said, these are greasable leaf spring bolts. So lubed them up. Now we can raise the vehicle up, remove the jack. Just want to remind everyone to use safety whenever they're doing anything on their car. Always use a jack stand. Be careful. Lower the vehicle, and after you had tightened down those lug nuts before lowering it, make sure they're torqued to spec, which is about 100 foot-pounds. And if you found this content helpful, hit the subscribe button.